Right, so a great many things in political discourse upset me. In case you hadn't noticed up until now, these vids are called Damo Rants for a reason, after all. But nothing triggers me quite like attacks on benefit claimants, and nobody is quite so blatantly cruel in their glee at doing so, to my mind, than Andrew Pierce, a man who seems to more and more resemble a Game of Thrones White Walker with each passing year as more and more of what passes for humanity leaves his hard-right sneering corpse. This is a guy who seems to derive genuine pleasure out of creating misery for others, a walking, talking hate crime. And he gets paid handsomely for it with his all-too regular appearances on Good Morning Britain or Jeremy Vine, together with his daily fail column and cropping up in his more natural home of GB News, where the truth, in my opinion, has never stopped them so far. Sir Piers has gobbed off in his daily fail column that there is an army of shirkers out there claiming sickness benefits, which the British taxpayer is footing the bill for. He said, "You all know who these shirkers are. You know the families. You know where they live. You've seen them drinking their cans of beer late in the morning, fag hanging out of their mouths. They've normally got Sky Sports blaring. How do they pay for that? I'll tell you, through your benefits." He's also complaining that the government are acting too slowly on this, moaning that Rishi Sunak needs to act faster than kicking the can down the road to 2025. He's whined that that's 2 years away. That's too long. The benefit bill is already at a record £26 billion. We're paying in incapacity benefits. Do you know how many hospitals that would pay for? Literally hundreds. Language like this is terrifying people. Terrifying people both who have lived through this shirkers versus workers mantra and mentality under this Tory government before, and are seeing them coming for them again. The migrant bashing, frankly, not landing a target so much anymore. So let's start up another culture war, this time on the disabled or the long-term sick, but also attacking a lot of people who have not been targeted by venomous Tory attitudes like this previously from the self-proclaimed Tory boy Pierce. One massive reason the bill is up is thanks to the government's mishandling of the pandemic. The desire initially, when seeing this modern-day plague sweeping across Asia and Eastern Europe towards us in the beginning of 2020, the deaths that ensued at that time, and Boris Johnson going, well, let's just take it on the chin. Well, people did die here, so many of them, in fact. But so many of those who survived have been left with long-lasting health issues because of it, long COVID. Unable to work as a result for a variety of different reasons. It's affected so many people in so many different ways. So many of us who were long-term sick or disabled or carers for others who were saying when we came under assault by the Tories to others supporting their mantra at that time, I hope you never get sick yourself. Well, some certainly will have done. And now the Tories are coming for them too, being egged on by a man paid to lie, frankly, to the British people. So let's deal with Pierce directly and what he's saying here. This is a guy who's so dishonest in the bile he is retching up into the public domain, that always rancid daily fail he works for. He's more than happy to keep on publishing. But he doesn't even use his own name. For some reason, Patrick Connolly isn't good enough for him. Your mum was Irish. You have a proper Irish name, fella. Why the apparent shame in that? Not Tory enough. He's painting a picture of Benefit Street. His imagery of a typical benefits claimant is straight out of a Channel 5 poverty porn documentary. The reality is you're more likely to find these people queuing up at the food bank these days, along with people who are actually in work, no less, as the benefits paid never go far enough. Many people on benefits are in work, let's not forget that, but the benefits, they were frozen for years in the name of austerity, and they've never caught up. And the cost of living crisis is hitting people living under those means now harder than anyone else, harder than ever before. Oh, they get more money, though, some of these. Some will say, yeah, well, some do. They get it for a specific reason as well, to meet their additional needs if they're disabled or whatever requires having gone through a, in itself, invasive and anxiety-inducing assessment process. That's for their additional needs that you, with your health that you have, don't need. So why are you having a go at them for needing that extra support in order to get by normal life? As things are so many are having to use that additional funding now for food or other bills, and their needs are now going unmet still, because it's still not enough. Tory Britain, the sort of country Andrew Pierce likes. For another thing, as I've often covered here, taxpayers are not footing the bill for this because taxes don't pay for anything. Also, another reason the benefit bill is so high is because they count pension payouts amongst it, just to make it look dramatically worse in the media. How many of you consider the state pension to be a benefit rather than something you've paid into your entire life to look after you in retirement? Well, if the government are prepared to be dishonest about that, why not everything else benefits related as well? Also, if Pierce wants to talk about taxpayers being conned, they should frankly stop buying the Daily Mail, which is infamous for its tax avoidance, not least by its owner, Lord Rothermere, who lives in France and has non-dom status for tax reasons. If Pierce was so committed to ensuring a good deal for taxpayers, then he might consider quitting his column, because publishing this in a tax-avoiding hate rag is just peak hypocrisy, let's face it. But let's stick with that notion of tax avoidance a little bit longer as well, by the way, as here's a cunning wee graph exposing what Pierce is so upset about versus what he completely fails to mention. I'll just leave that image hanging for a moment, shall I? Pierce is, of course, attacking benefit fraud, or what he perceives as fraud, people on the take. That's the narrative he's trying to spread, that there's so many of them. But the truth is, as you can see in that graph, it is negligible. Benefit errors are also minimal. Benefits people are entitled to but going unclaimed is rather interesting. It's substantially more, as you can see, right in bright green in the middle of that graph. The bill should be higher than it is now by rights. But many people choose not to claim, largely, I think, because of the stigma surrounding claiming, sown by fools like Pierce. And the elephants in the room are the two separate estimates there of tax avoidance and tax evasion, which are never mentioned and never prioritised, and which this same Tory government that Tory boy Pierce supports have in no uncertain terms been a part of, with their tax loopholes, their mates' rates, and their corporation supporting, donor encouraging ways. Look at the pandemic again. Let's come back to that for a moment. How much cash was lost to the VIP lane for PPE? Sunak wrote all of that off, which is why his stop the boats mantra doesn't apply to the yachts of those who cashed in, of course, Michelle Moan? But sure, ignore them, chase the poorest instead, who don't have enough to live on. Cash lost to millionaires and billionaires like that is a true harmful hit to the economy. It's not those on benefits doing that. They spend all of their cash in the economy. Not that it's enough, but whatever they do get is spent in the economy. Therefore, they are economically active, in which case, because the more money ordinary people have to spend, since they all spend pretty much all of their income at that low level of income, creates local and regional economic growth because the money is working. That creates jobs, all because money has to be spent, has to work in order to be of benefit to the economy overall. You give it to a rich person or let them off some copious amounts of tax evasion or tax avoidance, and it disappears into their copious offshore money bin, never to be seen again, where it languishes forever and certainly isn't doing any work economically. Without people having this cash and spending it, you'd literally see more high street shops going bust than we already are. We just saw Wilko go under, a cheap shop, often used by those with the least to live on, who don't have enough anymore. That shop has gone under. And all the others we've seen collapse in the last 13 years, I'm sure you can think of a few yourself, can be directly linked to the Tories hitting the spending power of all of us at the working classes, and the actions of this hard-right idiot in Andrew Pierce stealing oxygen to spout more bile against those with the least is a threat to the high street and a threat to the British economy. Every pound spent by someone on the high street, whether they work or they don't, is returned to the Treasury and then some via taxation, giving the government more room to spend more money on the things we need. They can print more money to do that. Whether they choose to or not, that's a completely other matter. That's political choice. But that is how the economy works. If you listen to Pierce, though, he thinks it is money that would be better spent on hospitals. Well, if you keep starving people and denying them the basics they need to survive, you will need more hospitals, absolutely. But then your party promised 40 of them, didn't it? And where are they? It's not as if the Tories aren't resurrecting their war on the poor, their bashing of benefits again anyway. It's just that Pierce wants them to do it even faster than they are. Because let's face it, evidently enough people didn't die the first time around. Some 120,000 people whose deaths were directly linked to benefit changes up to 2017. A study published by the British Medical Journal. The Tories then decided to stop counting as it became too embarrassing for them, not because they were afraid of more people losing their lives. The same study discovered that if welfare changes brought in by the coalition government in 2010 hadn't happened, some excess 45,000 deaths could have been avoided. A sign not only that the system was not working prior to the Tories coming in, and with the help of the Liberal Democrats, but instead of making it better, they made it significantly worse. And now they're coming for these people again with more reforms promised in 2025 should they remain in power. The emphasis will not be on the health and well-being of the benefits recipient, but on what they would be deemed capable of doing in the way of work, possibly working from home if needs be. As the pandemic proved, a lot of people are quite capable of doing that, if their health suits it. The new system will see the return of the dreaded work capability assessment, which the Tories had said they'd done away with, but with the new assessment being linked to claiming personal independence payment, PIP, the main non-means tested benefit for disabled people to cover their additional living needs. Therefore, the logical conclusion is if you aren't officially registered as disabled, you're probably going to be found fit to do some kind of work. The changes will, it is estimated, reduce benefits for the average claimant families by some £400 a month, which should delight depraved dunces like Andrew Pearce, but should horrify people that such conversations are happening during a cost of living crisis. This also smacks of a deliberate targeting of people who have recognised health issues which are not classified as disabilities, and long COVID, let's face it, firmly falls into that box. Work will set you free is the Tory mantra once again. It would surprise the hacks, the likes of Pearce and any others who celebrate inflicting such misery, to be found wearing T-shirts with "Albeit Mac Frey" emblazoned on them at some point. If you're paying attention to anything Andrew Pearce says on this, you're little more than an ill-informed zombie who, like him, gets your rocks off in scaring people less well off than yourself. I can only speculate. But instead of having empathy for those less fortunate, you get off on someone else being more miserable than you are. What hate-filled creatures such people must be, not to mention blatantly unintelligent, when there has been so many examples of wealthy people getting away with being on the take to the tune of so much more cash than your typical benefit claimant is scratching an existence out of over. And this lot would take even more from them. The death toll will inevitably rise again, and Pearce will presumably have a smile on his face about that, because he's driving that narrative. Not alone, there are others, but he's the one that's flagged up the other day in the most recent news in his Daily Mail column. People are terrified. My inbox has had several people asking me to highlight this particular story regarding Andrew Pearce and what he said now, because of the fear involved. And how can I not do that when, as a carer myself, I've lived through it? My family are survivors of this the first time around. It is largely what politicised me in the first place. It is where so much of my anger, so much of my rage stems from. And I now have this video small business in this that allows me to talk about it, highlight it, help support my family, to an audience no less, which still humbles me that people even listen to me, frankly, and combat the evil narratives of right-wingers getting rich behind their newspaper columns and their television appearances promoting what is, in my mind, a cull the poor narrative. Far too many people got sucked into this before. Please don't be sucked in by it again. If people are long-term sick, if they're disabled, they've been assessed as such. Yes, the assessments are rubbish. Yes, the people conducting them are often not properly trained, but that's in order to try and prevent successful claims, not to encourage them. So having succeeded in a claim is in itself an achievement in Tory Britain. But having a trial by media on such people yet again now, encouraging a new wave of neighbours reporting people because they happen to be having a good day, because they've managed to go out in public that day, because they have a Facebook page, God forbid, therefore must be capable of rational thought to some degree, or the all too common, well, they don't look disabled to me attitudes, with the likes of Pearce encouraging people to report that as fraud. All of a sudden, everyone is an assessor. Having been through all of this once myself, these assessments, this war on the poor, I can tell you I still to this day wake up in the night afraid, irrationally as that is, because of what we went through before. It still affects me now. I'm the carer, not even the disabled person in question. If the likes of Pearce were so determined to clamp down on people getting something for nothing, why don't they use their columns instead to report the fraud of this government more? It's a lot higher after all, but then the poorest are a softer and easier target, aren't they? The actions and hate speech, frankly, for that is what this is, surely, of people like Andrew Pearce is physically repulsive. So why listen to them? Why read their columns? Why watch them on TV? But what do you think, though? Are you enamoured of Pearce? Do you agree with him? If so, I'd love to hear you try and justify it. Are you horrified and frightened like I am, frankly, like the people who have messaged me asking me to cover this story, that this is coming back again? Horrible history looking set to be repeated by a party that clearly thinks it hasn't killed enough people through denying them the means to live. Have your say on this. Be part of this conversation. I want to hear from you on this. What do you think? Thanks for watching, though. I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where the new Tory DWP Minister Mel Stride looks set to take over the mantle of former DWP boss Ian Duncan Smith as a new Dr. Death as he pushes these reforms forward. And, well, I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.